Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
I am so pleased to have with me here today Leah Hiller. Leah is a pediatric occupational therapist, an educational consultant, and a former Jewish day school teacher. Leah provides teachers and parents with the strategies, support, and evidence-based resources to help children thrive at home, school, and play. In addition to providing individualized occupational therapy services in her private practice, Leah offers workshops for parents and educators, and she teaches graduate courses in special education. Leah lives here in Los Angeles with her family, and her OT therapy studio is located in a natural setting, her backyard. I am such a big fan of the work that she does, and I'm thrilled that she's joining me here today to share some great insights. Welcome, Leah. First, how are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. It is just always a treat to get to chat with you.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to have you here. And I just want to jump right in. You know, we've been talking a lot about kids who struggle with a number of different challenges. And as you know from the work that we do, those challenges can differ greatly. And parents have a lot of questions about the types of interventions that are available and how they work. And you are our introduction to occupational therapy. So I would love to just jump in and talk about occupational therapy. What is it? Who it helps? And I know that's a big, broad question, but I know that if I'm going to ask anyone, you are the person to ask. So let's just dive in.
Well, yeah, start with the big stuff, really. So occupational therapy is an interesting name. Occupations are not jobs. I do not help children find jobs. But what I do is we think of occupations as the things that take up our time, that our daily activities, what we do every day. And my role as an occupational therapist is to help kids really thrive in their daily occupations. If it's play, if it's learning, making friends at school, at home, it's really helping children and their families to be successful in however they spend their time.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're integrating a number of different skills. So you're building skills in a number of different areas. So when kids come to see you, what are some of the things that they are struggling with?
Well, I'll say right now we are in the midst of a global pandemic and families are stuck at home. And now more than ever, I would say it's self-regulation. Families, the phone calls I'm getting are help. My child is feeling dysregulated. They are just having a really hard time managing themselves, which is so understandable, right? This is such a dysregulating time for me as a grown-up, and of course for the kiddos I see and my own children. So I'd say that's the biggest thing now. The other thing that I'm getting, which is interesting, is from families who maybe there were like hints of challenges before, maybe a phone call from the teacher, a conversation with a principal about a struggle, or maybe something that was kind of hinted. But now that the parents are suddenly homeschool teachers, maybe your child's difficulty with handwriting is all of a sudden front and center, or their visual processing, it just seems to be a bigger problem, or difficulty with body awareness, like help, my kid is just bumping into everything. They're in my space. I need help with it. And so maybe they had hints of this before, but now that we're all trapped and trying to learn and play and do all those activities from home, I'm seeing those kinds of referrals too. And then again, my practice is always full with kids who are labeled with maybe autism. They might be diagnosed with ADHD. They may have a motor delay. All of those kinds of things are always a part of what we do.
So it sounds like there are kids who've had kind of these pre-existing struggles before. And then there are some kids who are borderline, like they had them, but they really didn't need any intervention. But now that they're at home, parents are really seeing the struggle and realizing that their kids need some additional support for what they're dealing with. And I'm wondering how much is the stress of this situation exacerbating some underlying issues that were already there or contributing to new issues that weren't there before? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on that. Well, I think one thing that's really interesting is as an OT, we get to take a different lens. I'm not necessarily looking at this from like a deficit model of, when we go to the doctor, I'm sick, I'm having this problem, I need it to get fixed. As an OT, I get to more look at function, like how well am I functioning in this current set of circumstances? And so I think what's happening now is when you look at that function model, there's a lot of pieces that are off. So it's like, yeah, in my regular life, when my kid gets to go to soccer practice every day before school or after school, and then has this activity and that activity, and our life is full of social time and physical activity and so much to go and see and do, we maybe have some things that flare up from time to time, but now that we're taking away all of these things, like our environment has changed so much, it's not necessarily that we're looking at it as like, this kid is struggling, this kid is the problem, we need to fix that problem. It's like, hey, our situation has changed, and help us look at all the parts of it, right? Like help us come up with strategies for home, help parents understand, like, how do I respond when that happens? And then also help the kid kind of like demystify what's going on. And then we can put the strategies in place. So I think that's kind of nice because, yeah, at this time I'm feeling it. Like this is an overwhelming time for me as for all of us. But what's important to realize is that there are strategies out there that can help.
That's a really good point. And I love the idea that, what you're really talking about is kids who may be struggling with managing this really difficult situation and really helping them to better kind of function, because you mentioned function. You're helping them to better function in this new situation that they find themselves in.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's really what we're trying to do. And I do tend to try to be, I want to look at it as not a silver lining, like really, this is the worst. It is so hard to say anything positive about this right now. And yet I will say that it can be an opportunity. Like sometimes, parents recognizing the strengths and challenges of their kids in these close circumstances can be a really good opportunity. And I think for parents and kids that are having a harder time at home, to stop and say, yeah, I'm having a really hard time. Like, what can we do together? Because yes, this is of epic proportions, but bumps are going to come along the road in the future, and it won't be so terrible to have a toolkit of things we can do about it.
Great. And speaking of toolkits, I know that you are always one to have really great strategies that parents can use at home and that educators can use at school. Do you have any sensory strategies that you have found to be helpful to kids and their families?
For sure. I do. So I think one thing that's been fun right now, we're all in this Zoom world. Most of the kids are trying to learn virtually. And one thing that really helps, and I've put together some Zoom breaks. We used to call them brain breaks, right? But now they're Zoom breaks. And what these Zoom breaks are really heavy work. The lingo we use in OT land is proprioceptive input. It's that muscle input that can impact our joints and muscles, and it tends to be calming. It's like if you're into working out or running, which I'm not a runner, but I'm told that big pressure that you get on your muscles, it's really calming and it's why you feel good after you work out. And sometimes if we are feeling dysregulated, getting a dose of that proprioceptive input, that heavy work, is really helpful. It can help us kind of get into that just right zone. And so what we did is we kind of thought about what are some good activities that help kids do just that. So one of my favorite ones to start is flying like Superman, right? Lay on your belly on the floor or a mat, and you are doing this static position where you see as straight as an arrow. If you can fly with your arms forward and your legs extended and keep both your legs and your arms off the ground without bending them, and see how long you can hold it. And I'll have families, I'll do it with my kids where we'll make it a contest. How long can we all fly like superheroes? Oh, it's intense. There's not much movement. You can do it pretty much anywhere. And it gives you that intense proprioceptive input. The other one my kids love are planks. You know, if you made me do it in a workout class, I'd probably resist it. But I can tell you that taking that break for a few minutes and getting down there with your kid and doing a plank on the ground, you'll probably feel better after. And taking a step back, there's so many activities like this that we do. And Karen, I'm happy to send you my list of resources to share. But the other thing that I think is really important is making sure that kids get why we're doing it. Like, mommy's been in a meeting for 45 minutes and it's a Zoom meeting and I need a break. My engine is running really high. This is what I'm going to do with my break, and then check in after. I just took a break. I did this, and this for my body. I feel like I'm ready to get back to Zoom. And I think being explicit about it is really good. There's no way our kids are going to feel great about having to sit down and be in front of a computer all day. I don't like it. But if we can make it clear that, like, yeah, this is hard and I have to do something about it, and here's what I can do, I think that's really good modeling.
That's really great because you're validating some of the feelings that they are having and then modeling the appropriate response or a strategy that can help. And then you're showing them and explaining to them how you felt afterward.
That's the goal. That's really the goal. And I think it's important to recognize, and like, we all are kind of getting okay with the fact that this is really hard. Like, I don't want to pretend with my kids that this is fun or this is what school's supposed to be like, but it's what we've got right now. And so kind of working within those parameters.
Great. That's really some great strategies. And I think that I can probably use some of those with my kids. I think I told you I have a first grader who's definitely zoomed out. 3 hours a day of Zoom is tough, like you're saying. I think it's, in a lot of cases, it's just not developmentally appropriate for a kindergartner or first grader to sit in front of a screen for that extended period of time.
I agree. And I will tell you, I first put these down into like one sheet because before school started, as we were scrambling to get ready, I always do workshops and in-services with groups of teachers. And these are now all on Zoom, and they're really kind of short and sweet workshops about an hour long. And as we're doing them, the teachers are antsy, right? This is content like we're talking about maybe social stories or sensory strategies, things that we're all kind of into and are active, but half an hour in, they need a break. And so it was like, oh, what good modeling. Let's all do an L stand, which is an inversion position where you're basically making an L shape, but upside down. And we took that break, and the teachers kind of all came back. And the second half hour, it was a fresh start. So after that, after seeing this pattern a few times and recognizing like, if grown-up teachers can't sit through an hour-long Zoom activity, then maybe our 6-year-olds are going to struggle with it too.
And it seems like these are a lot of strategies that educators who are trying to navigate this distance learning mode of instruction can utilize. and have the kids do it all at the same time. So they're all, developing these strategies to manage, all of this extensive sitting and squirming. I see a lot of squirming in their seats during this time. It's a nice brain break.
Exactly. And I think what's been really fun, again, fun, is that the right word? What's been interesting for me is helping families kind of troubleshoot this whole process. Again, doing it with my own kids, but also doing it with my clients. For example, I had a phone call from a longtime client that was really, I bought a wiggle cushion, which is one of these like little sensory cushions you might see that helps your kid kind of wobble around. Well, that movement, that extra movement for this kid happened to not be helpful. Instead of giving this kid exactly, she said, I looked and everyone says I need to let them like wiggle around in his seat because that's what was going to help. And we kind of went over it and we're like, you know what, that movement is actually elevating the kid and making it even harder for him. And so we decided instead we would give that child some heavy work and moved his workstation. One of his workstations is now positioned on the floor. He lays on his belly on his floor, got his iPad set up there and a slanted board so he can do writing as needed. And that works for a while. And then he has position number 2, which is a standing desk. All that is a bookshelf that's been cleared and he stands up there. And then when that gets done, he heads back to his belly for some more work. And it's really important to recognize that like the one size fits all is just non-existent. Everyone was saying at the beginning, set up a desk for your kid. And apparently Amazon and all these stores were sold out of children's desks. And I thought it was so interesting to see that now kids aren't able to sit at their desk for the entire time.
No, they're not.
What they need is a desk and a place to lay down on their bellies and do some work and a standing spot and maybe a wiggle spot too.
And really what you're talking about is flexibility, and really making sure that the learning environment, any kinds of interventions that you are utilizing are really tailored to what that child needs and being in tune to what that child needs because it's going to be different from child to child. And in a particular child, it may be different what that child needs now versus what that child needed pre-COVID.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the learning we want to do. I would rather us teach our kids to check in with themselves, right? I would rather than me going out and saying, desk, my kid needs a desk. They need a wiggle cushion. I'm going to put them at the desk, at the wiggle cushion. It's going to work. I thought about it. What I'd rather us do is teach our kids, hey, I think we should try a couple different things for you. And I want you to think about what's working. I want you to think about what's not working and let them do that. And I have a 6-year-old and they're not the most reflective people in the world, but they do have a sense of when it's going well and when it's not. And I know that that's really what I'd like her to develop is the ability to say, I've been sitting at this desk for a while and I'm not doing that well. I'm going to go to the floor. It's not working for me here. I'm going to go back over there. I would rather them be able to manage their own learning or at least understand their own regulation a little bit, because then we can work as a team.
Right. And that's really a collaborative approach where you're involving your child and getting feedback from them in terms of what's working and what's not working, because they're the ones having the experience and they're in the best position to tell you whether or not something is working. And then you can then use that feedback to determine what you can do to further support them. You talked about kids who are really dysregulated during this time. And I'm also getting a lot of calls from parents who are saying that, my kid is really dysregulated in a way that I haven't seen before, or there's been an uptick in the dysregulation. And, as a neuropsychologist, I think about dysregulation as one of those executive functions, right? It's one of those things that kids learn how to regulate their emotions, regulate their responses, regulate their bodies. And I know that you have been working on executive functioning, and executive function has become such a hot topic. It was a hot topic before, but now parents are seeing, like you said, up close and personal, their kids struggling with a number of executive functioning issues. Self-regulation is one of those, but they're also struggling with organizing and planning because now they've got to do everything online. They don't have those transition cues that they had at school. And now they're having to transition on their own. They're having to, during their asynchronous learning time, they have to effectively use that time to get their work done. And I know that you've got a unique approach to addressing executive functioning challenges in kids. And I just think it's spectacular. I'd love for you to talk about your Executive C.H.E.F.S program.
Oh, yeah, it's my favorite. And I know we've talked about this quite a bit, but definitely putting this in the context of the pandemic, again, this is a really difficult time. And yet it is an opportunity, I think, for us to really we're stuck in there with our kids as it is, right? That is not something I can do anything about right now. And so I think there's really an opportunity to work on some of the executive function that is so essential in our everyday life. And again, what executive function is, all it is a big group of components that we all need. So this group of skills, like you said, is regulating our emotions and self-monitoring our emotions. But it's also about paying attention. It's our working memory. It's having flexibility with problem solving. And just, again, really big for school, organizing, prioritizing.
Yes.
Really big tasks. And so right now, we're seeing how difficult that is to manage. But being at home is also an opportunity because there's so many daily tasks that we as grown-ups are doing that require executive functioning. Getting the laundry done, making sure groceries get to your house, however that is, and cooking. And cooking is something that, especially that start of the pandemic, I felt like I was spending all my time cooking and just trying to keep my kids busy so that dinner could happen. When we started, we were just always cooking, and I was always trying to just get my kids out of the kitchen so I could get my stuff done. And that wasn't very effective. And so I started bringing my own children, and my kids are 4 and 6, into the process of making dinner. And it started really simple. Like, I think at first it was like squeezing lemons with the lemon squeezer. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the best fine motor activity ever. It's fine motor. Okay, great. And then we started getting to the next level, which was my kids started requesting things like, I want to make this for dinner. Great. This is a recipe. Check where the ingredients are. Go gather the ingredients. Measure them. What comes next? We've got to sequence it. I realized in very short order that, I'd say after the first few weeks of banging my head against the wall and trying to get dinner made, that the more I involved my kids in it, the better dinner was, and the more skills they were picking up. My big light bulb moment was like, I remember my 6-year-old opening the fridge and being like, we got to get heavy cream. How are we going to have ice cream? We've run out of heavy cream. We should she actually was like, we should write it down. That's a great kindergarten lesson, right? Write the word heavy cream on the grocery list. But it really got me thinking about how much more fun my experience was now and how much my kids were learning. Every single executive function I could think of was being addressed while we were making lemonade. So what I did is I recognized that at this point, and it was very early on in the COVID experience, and all of my clients were virtual. And when I tried to do regular OT virtually, it wasn't fun. It wasn't engaging. I wasn't enjoying it. they weren't enjoying it. And instead, when we shifted and I said, okay, for the next session, we're going to be in your kitchen. And I could get the kids to make their list, go to the kitchen, check for the items. And the next time we would actually make these things.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe during these individual sessions, these kids were making amazing, creative, and actually like sustaining meals for their family.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a kid. We made everything with Cheetos. We made Cheeto chicken. It actually went into frittatas one day. Fortunately, they were individual cupcake frittatas, so not everyone had to eat the frittatas with Cheetos. But not only were we able to address the fine motor skills, every executive function, and this kid now went from being like, oh, I need to get when's dinner, to actually being able to like contribute to his family. And the sense of pride was just immense. And so we shifted from there. And the one component that really was missing was the executive function that involves the social part, right? Understanding and responding to different points of view. So from that, we created a group. It's called Executive C.H.E.F.S. And what we do is we cook and we get together, and it's a group of kids who all have different areas that, different strengths, different areas of need. Some of them have diagnoses and some don't, and we cook together. And at the end of each session, these kids then present something to feed their family. I think that some of the dysregulation we're seeing in kids is just a reflection of the dysregulation that we're ourselves experiencing. And lots of people will tell you there's something about sharing a meal together, but there's also something about like being able to give back. And I think that was one of the reasons that the kids felt so good about what they made for dinner. I was thrilled because when we made the group, I was really interested in tracking the growth in their executive function skills, and having the sessions was such an effective way for me to watch the changes in their working memory, in their problem solving, in their safety awareness. I mean, it got to the point where kids were checking each other and saying, oh, you got a metal bowl. You remember that's not supposed to go in your microwave, right? Okay. And the other kids are doing a demonstration. This is how you safely handle a knife. And they're showing it to each other. I mean, I couldn't believe how much progress we made and how like delicious and bizarre the recipes got.
I think that is brilliant, Leah. I think that is brilliant because like you said, you're working on these core skills that might be problematic for some kids, the fine motor and the executive functioning skills. But together, these kids are accomplishing a goal, which in and of itself, instills that level of pride. And then you're sharing that experience with your peers and presenting it to your family. So again, it's got that social component as well that you've described. So it sounds like that particular program really hits on a number of different things. And during the process of developing this meal and cooking, they're having fun at the same time. And I think anytime you can share an experience, particularly at a time when there's so much social isolation because people can't be together, you're actually promoting a task that they can work on together and share with others. And that is a really fun experience for kids at the same time as you're developing these skills.
I loved it. And I can tell you as a parent, I was like, the feedback sometimes that I was getting from the parents in the group was like, it's so nice. Even if I'm eating quesadillas again, like my kid made quesadillas and it's great. Like just to have something off the table, even if we're eating Cheeto quesadillas, like, yay, someone else made dinner.
Right.
What a party.
And it seems that, a lot of the complaints that parents have is that the kids can't decide what they want to eat for dinner, or you make something and they don't like it. Well, now they've made it themselves. And so it's almost like it increases the likelihood that they will actually eat what it is that was made for dinner when they themselves were involved in that process.
As we learned one of our first sessions, if they burn the pizza bagel, they will still eat the pizza bagel.
I love that.
It was great. And I can say when we ran the group, each time it changed a little. One of the things I wasn't expecting, we added in a parent workshop separate from the kids. One of the coolest things we were able to do, I think, was kind of train the parents on how to support their kids. An executive function is different than I think other areas, right? Like if you're working on gross motor strength, it really can be helpful to have like a helpmate, like someone to, coach you on your form and to, get out there and do that obstacle course with you. On the other hand, executive function is really the art of stepping back as a parent, right? Like your kid's going to become the most proficient at organizing and prioritizing and problem solving and doing all of those things, managing their time, if you actually aren't a help, right? If you're taking a step back, your kid actually gets a lot more out of it. And I think that workshop, which could have been subtitled like "Back Off, Mom," was actually really something that was helpful to me too as a parent, to recognize that like this is different than other skills. And sometimes me giving them the space to get it wrong and burn something was actually where the best learning could happen.
Yes. And I often say that, that's when kids learn the best. They learn from their mistakes, right? I mean, learning can't occur if you're not making mistakes and trying to introduce things differently. I mean, that's part of the process, right? Making mistakes is part of the learning process. And I think we have to normalize that. And I think as parents, we want to jump in and help and, and keep them from failing. But, again, that's part of the process of learning.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big things, OTs always talk about this, I remember this from graduate school, the idea of this just right challenge. Maybe this isn't a uniquely OT thing, but I remember it so well. The idea of really thriving, right in that middle section, the just right section. You don't thrive when things are too hard. Okay, I'm not giving my 6-year-old the full set of knives and saying, make sushi, go to town. But I'm also not making things too easy for them, right? I'm really kind of watching and seeing like, what is their just right challenge and recognizing this. And this isn't just for executive function. It's really true in everything. Is like, I feel like my art as a parent is figuring out, okay, I want my kid to have that just right amount of support for this. And what's too much support and what's too little support, and knowing that mark just changes constantly.
That's great. That is great because you want to meet them just above where they are. So you're talking about sufficient challenge. And then when they've mastered that level, then you increase the challenge, right? Slightly. And then they meet that challenge and then you increase it slightly. And so they gain the satisfaction again of accomplishing something and feeling good about it.
I hope so.
So I know that, the work that you do has changed considerably in the midst of this COVID pandemic, but it sounds like you've given parents lots of tools that they can use to help their kids at home. And you've been able to support kids virtually, kids who are struggling with fine motor skills, kids who are struggling with executive functioning issues, including dysregulation. And I just think it's so important to know that the work that you're doing and the help that you're giving parents can really ensure that many kids can be successful in different areas of their lives. I think it's just such a gift that you're giving so many families. And, one of the things I like to ask is, can you give me an example? And I'm sure for you that there are a number of examples of a time when you realized, you've been doing this work for a while. When did you realize that the work that you do is really making a difference in the lives of others?
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, I just have to say thank you. That's like the nicest thing someone said to me in a really long time.
It's true.
I really appreciate it. And I feel the same about the work you do. So it's mutual. Well, when did I really realize it? I mean, I think it's when the kids come back and start teaching the other kids, right? And I think that's why I've loved that group experience. I think I'm doing the best when I'm doing nothing, right? When I take a step back, and I guess C.H.E.F.S is at the front of my head, but there's times where I would just be stepping back and watching, and the kids would be managing themselves and giving each other feedback. And I think that's when I felt the most successful, is when I could take a step back and say, like, I guess I'm done here. You guys talk to each other about problem solving strategies, because I got nothing else to add to that. So maybe it's just kind of taking the time to be quiet and just kind of noticing. I will say, when we went back in person, my clinic we're able to see kids individually, but we haven't yet resumed groups in person, and we haven't resumed co-treatment yet. I love working individually with kids. You get so much out of it, but I do think the ability for the kids to kind of interact and teach each other and support each other and like call each other out on stuff, that's like the best kind of learning. So I guess I'm anxiously awaiting a return to that, not just virtually, but also in person.
Right. I think we all want that in-person work to resume. We want that connection. But it sounds like even through the virtual work that you're doing, you are able to continue to see kids grow and transform and develop these skills that they will have and be able to utilize when things resume. And for that, I am grateful on behalf of all the parents that are working with you to do this great work, because I know it makes a difference for the kids. It makes a difference for their family members. And really what we're talking about is really transforming the lives of kids so that they can be more successful in different areas of their life. So I'm so appreciative of you for sharing all of these insights and these strategies that you're utilizing and helping parents understand what occupational therapy is. I think there are still some individuals who think that it has to do with fine motor or gross motor skills, but it's so much more. And you've just described what you do so beautifully. And again, I just want to thank you for being one of the very first guests on this podcast. Please tell our listeners how they can connect with you.
Oh, thank you. So the best way, I guess, I will say this, due to the nature of my work, I am not one to answer my phone. My phone is always off, right? You know that doesn't really work well for kids. So definitely via my website, which is hillertherapy.com. And then on there, you can reach out. And then my email is just Leah, Leah, at Hiller Therapy. You can always find me. I say I'm slow to respond to email. I'm definitely not the best at answering the phone, but we do get back to you. And it's only because we're busy playing and doing and cooking up a storm with the kids.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leah. I appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate and work with you to improve the lives of kids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. It's always a pleasure.
I had so much fun speaking with Leah. If you would like to know more about her programs, check out the show notes for this episode, where you will find a link to the resources discussed, including the sensory break freebie that she mentioned. Leah is a member of our Child Nexus professional community, our interdisciplinary community of professionals committed to providing high-level care and support to kids who struggle. If you are looking for someone to help your child, or you want to refer a family who has a child who is struggling, go to childnexus.com, the Find a Provider tab, and connect with one of our amazing clinicians, therapists, or education support specialists. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you, and I look forward to connecting again next week.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.